Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Mark. I'm Mark, and today we're going to be covering the very basics of grip and stance and how those things work together. Now, I'll be covering two different types of grip. I'll be covering semi-automatic handguns, and I will also be covering revolvers. So, with that being said, we'll go ahead and start getting into it. Before we begin on that though, we're gonna make sure this is clear. So, this magazine is empty. This weapon is clear. This is now a safe weapon to train with. We're gonna start with grip techniques. So what you wanna start with is a V, kind of like this with your hand, whether it be your right or your left. Both will be the same regardless. So you'll mate that up. This weapon's helpful because it's got grooves where you can kind of line up. But you made up like this. See? Knife hand, like that. Then you fold your fingers around like this. This is your basic one-handed shooting technique. Now, if you're actually going to be shooting one-handed, I'll cover some of that later. But for now, this is your basic grip that you'll have. And notice that goes both ways. Now, my index finger is right up here, right next to the slide on the frame. This is called indexing, and you want to do this because you never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. It's not really all that difficult to transition from here to firing. It's literally a millisecond if you train enough. Now, when you come to your other hand needs to fit right here in this groove. So you put your other hand up, you line your thumbs up. You don't want them quite on top of each other, but very close. And they're both pointing the same way. Very similar to how you hold a golf club if you've ever been golfing. So you mate them both up, and then you punch out. And now this is the most stable platform that you will have for your handgun shooting techniques. Now this is more applicable to semi-automatic weapons than anything else, and this is just the grip. This is not the stance, this is just how do you hold your weapon in a basic format. Now, what this enables you to do is enables you to be safe, because now you can go anywhere and you have complete control over your barrel. And somebody can't come and grab and pull it away from you because you now have a solid grip on this. So that's how you do that with a semi-automatic handgun. Now, revolvers are a bit different, and for a couple of reasons. I'll go over and make sure this is clear with you. So you can see, all clear, nothing in the chamber. So, revolvers are a bit different because you cannot hold them the same way or you're going to not be a very happy camper. So, as you can see it here, there's a little bit of a gap between the chamber and the cylinder where the rounds are located. So, if you try and put your fingers in front of that, all of the pressure from the round blows out the side, and that can hurt your fingers in a very big way. So revolver techniques are a little bit different. There's two main ways to hold a revolver if you're going to be shooting revolvers as your primary. One is called T-cupping, where you kind of do this, and then you extend out. Notice the right hand stays the exact same way. And that's because this part doesn't change. Your right hand still needs to come over here, make a V, and index. Because you do not put your finger on the trigger unless you're willing to destroy something. Your left hand being in there is where things get different. Because there's two different ways. You can do this, or you can come over here and mate and just tuck your thumb in instead of putting it out here. Tucking your thumb in is a little bit unwieldy but understandable, but this is a much more comfortable shooting grip for revolvers. Now, I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to be all up in arms. Why are you teaching T-cupping? That's an antiquated and outdated mode of shooting. Whoever wants to use that? Well, you're right. It is an old method of shooting. But it's how we've been teaching people how to shoot revolvers for nearly 150 years since they came out in 1936. And people might know a thing or two about how to use them properly. Secondly, if you're using an older firearm with bad magazines, you might have to use T-cupping on semi-automatic handguns because magazines, especially older ones, are not always reliable. And you might have to hold the magazine in order to make sure the weapon continues functionality. So, and that's how we'll go over that. I'm a little zoomed out so you can see what I'm doing here. But we're going to work on what we're going to call stance. So in modern and practical terms, there's a couple of different stances that are accepted as the standard practice. I will cover all of them, and then I'll give you my recommended on or what I use every day. Now, you don't have to use this, but it is what I recommend because I find it the most useful and valuable one to learn. So, the one that you'll find taught the most because it was taught for longer is called the weaver. And what that is your primary foot or your right foot is far back. Your left foot or if you're right-handed and right-footed, it'll be your primary foot is super far back and your non-dominant foot is super far forward. Then you're kind of turned and you face like this. Now notice, your grip technique doesn't change all that much, but I find there's one major problem with gripping this specific way. One, this is super uncomfortable if you stand for long periods of times because you're at an angle and then you're having to turn and twist your torso around in order to get an accurate shot. Now there's something to be said that this is great for rifles and they're not wrong, but it's not comfortable in the long term. Now, there's one major issue with this stance. If you ever buy body armor or you get it, there's one problem with this, in that body armor covers your chest, and unless you get special side plates, right here is totally exposed, or if you're lefty, right here is totally exposed, which is all of your major internal organs, your heart, your lungs, all of the above. So I definitely do not recommend that stance. If you do shoot that way, or you want to start out shooting that way, that's fine, but I'm going to cover a couple of others that kind of bring about a balance, so to speak. Now, the next stance we're going to cover is called the isosceles. So, in this, legs are shoulder width apart, and you're kind of squared up on whatever you're going to shoot at. Then, when you punch out, it's going to be like this. You just kind of do a little bit of a squat. Not a lot, a little bit. So what this is the benefit of is that it works with the way that the human body works. Because when it comes to fight or flight, what we're likely going to do is either square up to fight something or turn to run the other way. And this kind of allows you to square up, but there's one kind of problem with it in that you're kind of easily rocked back if you're just standing with your feet a little bit shoulder width apart and you're like this. You get a little bit of lowered center of gravity, but it's not going to help you if you're too close. So what you really want is what myself and others are calling a modified isosceles. There's no true name for this yet, but basically what it amounts to is you get inside a stance that you would fight in, which for me would be a little bit, my right foot is a little bit further back than my left. I'm still square, my hips are still directed towards whatever I'm going to be targeting or fighting. And you kind of lower your center of gravity a little bit, and you can do this all day. And then you can walk and shoot all day because it's super comfortable. The modified isosceles is actually what they're teaching in modern police academies because it's the most beneficial way, because then it doesn't just translate to pistol shooting. If you're going to go into any sort of close quarters combat, you now have the ability to reach out and grab or redirect a hand. If you've got your handgun in one hand, you've now got the capability to not only fight in hand-to-hand combat, but to shoot from here if you need to as well. So, now let's put this all together. How does grip and stance work? Well, part of what I'm going to be teaching you now is punching out. So punching out is basically how you go from a draw into your shooting stance, whatever that may be. So your standard draw needs to be your exact grip that you have one-handed at all times, ready to go. So 3, 2, 1, and practice that. Let's practice it super slow from wherever you're going to have it. So your goal is to bring it up to your chest, pointed down range, and then you want to bring your hands together as you're going out. That's how you always want to be punching out. It doesn't matter what your stance, because you fall into your stance as you do that. So if you've got a weaver stance, you're now, oh, there's something down there. I'm punching out the same regardless of how I'm going to do this. So let's say this is my draw. I don't have a holster for this one right now, but it's going to be the same anyway. So I go up. And the reason you punch out from your chest is because as you come up, it's easier to find your sights. Because you don't want to do this, where you're coming out over your sights. We call it fishing, where you cast in a fishing rod over with your handgun. You don't want to be coming up and going like that, because then you're going to be off. You want to come up and straight out and find your sights as you punch out. That's going to be your best shooting and accuracy techniques. And it's the same regardless of whether you're isosceles weaver. It doesn't matter. For example, if I'm punching out using isosceles, it's not a lot of squat, but a little bit. So you're already getting in your stance. If I'm doing my modified isosceles, where it's a little bit like this, and practice it with both right and left-handed. You never know if one of your hands will be disabled and you're going to need to shoot with your offhand. So, and be prepared to move into your stance, whichever one you prefer, at any given time if you're going to shoot. Practice the way that you were going to. And part of the key to this is making sure you do it slowly over and over again. You're going to hear this a lot from ex-military guys, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That's true, but what they don't do is explain the how and whys behind it. So what they mean is practice getting good, perfect repetitions in slowly the first time. If you do this slowly and smoothly long enough, eventually you're going to be able to speed it up. And when it comes to a life or death situation, your body will have built up the muscle memory to just snap it up, find your sights, and be on target. Now, this is just the basics. I'm not going to cover why I'm pulling back and doing this. I'm not going to cover any of the actual drawing techniques that we have. This is basic stance and grip techniques. As I go through the rest of this Handgun 101 series, I'll cover the rest of that, but for now, this is all we're going to cover. Thank you for watching this episode of Off the Mark. We're going to be covering the very basics of firearms handling in both pistols and rifles over the next several months. We hope you stick around and learn something new. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you around next time.